Welcome to the Naked Foods YouTube channel. We're here today at Laura Bitten's house. We are going to make a low-carb, healthy lasagna. So we are going to use zucchini to replace our pasta noodles today and add more vegetables into our lasagna. I'll show you the ingredients that we're going to use for the recipe. You need about 6 zucchini, 1 eggplant, some fresh basil, fresh thyme, and fresh rosemary. We also have some pine nuts, Himalayan pink salt, roasted red pepper flakes, 1 lemon, 1 cottage cheese, and today we're going to use Nancy's brand cottage cheese. This is my favorite brand of cottage cheese because it doesn't contain carrageenan. So you want to be really careful and read your ingredients on your cottage cheese and make sure that it doesn't contain that ingredient, which most brands do. There are a couple other ones on the market, but Nancy's is our favorite to use. Great taste, great texture, all of that. We're going to use some crumbled goat cheese today in this recipe. And then we need 1 can of marinara sauce, whichever marinara sauce that you like. We love Newman's Own brand. And then we're gonna have some dried oregano for our recipe and some garlic powder and fresh ground pepper. You will also need some olive oil and balsamic vinegar, and then 1 pound of ground beef or ground turkey. We are gonna use a grass-fed ground beef today. At Naked Foods, we only use grass-fed ground beef because it is a healthier choice and a more sustainable choice for the planet. It's also leaner. So the beef that we're using today is about 96% lean, so equal to turkey. So what you're gonna do first is you wanna prep your zucchini and your eggplant first and get those into the oven. So we are going to make thin slices resembling zucchini noodles. So just like this, so you can see how thin that is. As thin as you can get it without the zucchini wanting to fall apart. So we're gonna go ahead and get that finished, and then we're gonna put it on a baking sheet and get it into the oven with a little bit of olive oil on it and get it cooked about halfway. It will finish cooking once we put the lasagna together. So what you're gonna wanna do is take your slices after you finish slicing all of them over here to your pan. We're gonna add a little bit of olive oil onto the pan, probably a little less than a tablespoon for the whole pan and for all the zucchini. And you can just spread that around with your hands and then lightly toss the zucchini in both sides. So we're also gonna use an eggplant today along with the zucchini. Eggplant is a great vegetable for this because it has a very similar consistency to the zucchini and will hold up under a high baking temperature. And we're just gonna slice it in these little disc shapes, and we're gonna put it in the center of our lasagna when we put our lasagna together. Eggplant is also a great vegetable because it's low in carbohydrates. It basically has no carbohydrates. It's mostly just fiber and water and nutrients. So it's a great vegetable to add to any dish to add some consistency without adding many calories at all. Okay, so we're gonna add about a tablespoon of olive oil onto the baking sheet, just like we did with the zucchini. And we're just gonna spread that out with our hands. Olive oil is a great baking oil. It doesn't have a really high heat temperature, so baking vegetables in it is the best way to use olive oil and to get that into your diet. So we're gonna add some nice healthy fats into this dish by covering these lightly in the olive oil. Eggplant is also one of those very thirsty vegetables, so it's gonna uptake this olive oil pretty quickly, and it's gonna help it to crispen and brown on the outside and then be nice and soft on the inside. So we're gonna put these in the oven and we're gonna bake them at 350 for about 15 minutes. When we put the lasagna together and assemble it and put it in the oven, they will continue to cook. So we only wanna cook these about halfway today. So we're gonna let that bake for about 15 minutes at 350. In the meantime, you wanna go ahead and start chopping your fresh herbs. So we have our basil, our thyme, and our rosemary. So with these fresh herbs, I wanna get rid of some of the stems. So we'll get rid of the end of the basil stems, a little bit of the end of the thyme stems. And then with the rosemary, the easiest way to do is just pull it off, and then we'll finely chop it. So we'll pull that away from the stems, and it will be ready to chop. And we're gonna do the same thing with the thyme. So you can just kind of, going against the grain, you can pull the leaves right off. And it's okay if you have a little bit of stem in there. We're gonna finely chop it, so it shouldn't be too big of a deal. So we've got that ready, and then we'll get rid of the main stems of our basil, separating the leaves from the stem pretty easily. And we're gonna roll it into a little bunch with the basil, and then just thinly slice. That's great. So we're just doing kind of a rough chop here. Same with the thyme. Perfect. And with the rosemary. So now we're going to make our cheese mixture. We have already fresh squeezed 1 whole lemon. So we're going to pour that into the food processor. You do need a food processor for this. We're going to use this cottage cheese, which I mentioned before, and we really need it to be smooth. We don't want to have the texture of the cottage cheese for this dish. So again, Nancy's Cottage Cheese, one of the best brands that you can use, contains probiotics that are good for your gut. Probiotics just keep your whole body healthy. You really want to make sure that you're focusing on eating foods that are fermented to help with gut health. So we're going to do 1 whole container of cottage cheese, and we are going to add our fresh herbs that we lightly chopped. So we're going to do a handful of basil. We are going to do about a tablespoon of rosemary and a tablespoon of our chopped thyme. We're going to do a couple cranks of fresh ground pepper, and we're going to do a teaspoon of Himalayan pink salt. So this is our favorite salt to use at Naked Foods. It has the highest mineral content in it, and this is the salt that is actually the oldest salt on the planet, so it has the highest nutrient content in it. We're going to use some garlic powder. We're going to do a teaspoon of that as well. And we're going to do a teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes and a teaspoon of dried oregano. So once we have all our ingredients in here, we are going to lock it in place and blend all of our ingredients until they're smooth. So after the ingredients are thoroughly mixed, probably about 30 seconds to a minute, this is what your cheese mixture should look like. Nice and creamy. It's got a slight green tint because of all the fresh herbs and tons of flavor. So this is much better than using a ricotta or any kind of whole milk cheese because this is basically just straight protein. Protein and probiotics, but it's going to have that very rich cheesy flavor to add to the lasagna. So our zucchini are about halfway cooked, which is perfect for a lasagna. And you want to go ahead and just leave your oven on 350 so that once we get our zucchini lasagna put together, you can just go ahead and throw that back in the oven to finish cooking. So now it's time to saute our ground beef for the dish. We have a pound of grass-fed ground beef. As you can see, it's extremely lean. There isn't a lot of marbling. It's mostly just really good meat. So we want to use grass-fed because cows were intended to only eat grass. So when they eat grass, they stay healthy and lean, and so does their meat, and so do we when we eat their meat. So you really want to try to get a local grass-fed ground beef. This is from Four Corners Ranch, which is local to us here in Knoxville, Tennessee. So we have that. The ingredients that you're going to need for your ground beef is garlic powder, fresh ground pepper, Himalayan pink salt, and a teaspoon of balsamic vinegar. So now that we have all our ingredients ready, we're going to saute our ground beef. So you want to go ahead and just get your skillet warming up. We're going to do this on a medium heat. So let that heat up for just a second, and then you're going to dump your beef in. And I love this tool. It's a wand tool that basically makes it easy for you to break your ground beef up into a really good texture. So we're just gonna break it up in the pan as it cooks. So as you'll notice, as the beef is cooking, if you're using a grass-fed beef, you're not gonna really have a lot of fat to drain in the end. There might be a little bit, and if you wanna drain that off into a colander, that's totally fine, or you can leave a little bit of the fat. So if the cow was 100% grass-fed, those fats are actually gonna have a lot of omega-3 in them from the cow eating grass. So that actually is something healthy for you to eat. And it's not gonna be a high amount of fat. So some fat in our diets is very healthy. And since we're doing a low carb dish, we wanna make sure that we do include some fats in it. So once our beef is about halfway finished, we're gonna go ahead and add our teaspoon, just 1 teaspoon of Himalayan pink salt. And then we will add some fresh ground pepper, about 3 turns of that. And then we're gonna do a teaspoon of our garlic powder. So now that our meat is getting closer to being done, you can see that there really isn't a lot of fat that we're gonna need to drain off this. This is a perfectly balanced, grass-fed ground beef. That's going to make our lasagna taste just like how you remember it. All the flavor, all the richness, without too much excess fat. So now that our ground beef has been cooked, we're ready to mix it together with the marinara sauce. So we've got our ground beef here, perfectly cooked, perfectly seasoned with our salt, pepper, garlic powder, and we're gonna add a little bit of balsamic vinegar to it now, and our marinara sauce. So we've got 1 teaspoon of balsamic vinegar. We'll add that. Give that a light stir. And then we're gonna use a basic marinara sauce. Like I said, you can use whatever brand that you like. We love Newman's Own brand. Nothing weird or artificial added to it. So we're gonna do about a cup of sauce into the meat. We wanna save a little bit more sauce for when we layer up our lasagna. So we'll just lightly mix this together, making sure it covers most of the ground beef. If you need to add a little bit more than a cup, that's totally fine. So we've got that ready. And now it's time to assemble our lasagna. So you want to start with a glass dish or ceramic dish. And we're going to lightly cover the bottom in some olive oil just so our ingredients don't stick. So we'll put a little less than a tablespoon in the bottom, and you're just going to spread that around with your hands, and you can rub some of the oil up onto the side of the pan just so nothing sticks. And again, we're just adding some healthy fats into this since it's a low carbohydrate meal. We want to have some fats in here. So we'll start with our first layer of zucchini. So you're just going to grab your halfway cooked zucchini noodles and layer them on the bottom. It's okay if they overlap each other. We just want to make sure we're covering the whole bottom of the pan, and you can kind of pick and choose your pieces. If you want to, we can go ahead and we're gonna cut some of these lasagna pieces in half so that we have kind of the right shapes to fit into our pan. So we'll just do this as we go. Making sure to cover up all of the bottom of the pan. Kind of like a puzzle piece. Okay, so we've got the whole bottom covered with our cooked zucchini noodles, and we're gonna go ahead and put a layer of our ground beef. So you can make your layers however thick that you'd like to, just making sure that you probably cover most of the surface of the zucchini with the ground beef on this first layer, and spreading it out as evenly as you can so that when you slice this into pieces, you have nice even pieces with the even spread out amounts of beef in each piece. So there we go. And then we're gonna do one more layer of our zucchini noodles on top of the beef. So again, you wanna try to cover most of the beef with your noodles. Okay, once we've got that second layer done, we're gonna do a cheese layer now. So we've already got our cheese all mixed up, all ready to go. So I'm gonna get out about 4 big spoonfuls of the cheese sauce, and then we're gonna spread it around. Gorgeous, look at all of those fresh herbs that you can see in the cheese mixture. And again, this is filled with probiotics, protein. This is a very high protein dish. You're gonna be very satisfied, very full, but you're gonna be full with good, healthy nutrition. No processed cheese, no high fatty beef, and no gluten. So this is a gluten-free, low carb, keto-friendly dish. So our next layer, we're gonna use our eggplant. So we've got our eggplant circular shapes, and we're just gonna layer these in here as tight and as close to each other as we can, trying to not leave too much space. It's not gonna be perfect, but we're gonna try to cover as much surface area as we can with our eggplant. And we'll go ahead and just finish off the rest of the ground beef on this layer. It's all coming together. And then we're gonna do one more layer of the zucchini noodles. This time I'm gonna go in opposite direction, just so when we cut it, it will help it stay together. Okay, then we're gonna do a little bit more of our sauce. So we're gonna do just a slight layer of sauce on this layer. So lightly covering the zucchini, not too much. We don't wanna have too much water into this dish, but some of this will continue to absorb into the vegetables since they are not cooked all the way. So just a light layer of sauce like this. And then we're gonna put the rest of our cheese mixture right on top of the sauce. And we'll do one more final layer of our zucchini just to seal in all of that good cheese and good sauce. Okay, and so for the topper, we're gonna do some crumbled goat cheese. And you can put as much or as little of this as you would like. And then we're also gonna top it with some pine nuts. Give it a nice crunch right on the top. So we're finished putting this together now, and we are going to put it into the oven, which is still heated at 350, for about 30 to 40 minutes. You just wanna make sure that all your vegetables are fully cooked and that your goat cheese is getting nice and crispy on the top. And here's our finished product. All of the good, none of the bad, super satisfying dinner for you and your family. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and stay tuned for more healthy takes on traditional classics.